How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Mount Silver Top 8, the Circuit Top 8 of the Mount Silver Invitational. I'm your commentator, one of your commentators for today, Eric, and I'm joined by Adi. You can say hi.
Guys,
What's up? All right, so we are here with our first top 8 match. It is going to be between Swaggy McBuckets and JoeUX9. I think the players are getting into team preview right now as we speak, so we're going to go ahead and switch you over to this view. All right, so these two players, both well-known Radon users, I guess. However, Mr. McBuckets here is choosing not to go with his Radon roots. However, JoeUX9 sticking with his bread and butter, I guess. This is the team that he managed to reach top 32 at the United States International, or the North American International Championships, as Swaggy McBuckets is going to be going with a rather interesting Zerndon build.
yeah, and so Swaggy's team is Jumpluff, Groudon, Xerneas, Incineroar, Tapu Koko, and Lopunny. Joe is using the same 60 used at US Internats with Rayquaza, Groudon, Incineroar, Tapu Koko, Crobat, and Ferrothorn. His team is really interesting. It's got Jumpluff, which of course has Rage Powder and Sleep Powder, and has synergy with Groudon because of Groudon's bringing Sun and Jumpluff's Chlorophyll, along with a fast Fake Out from Lopunny. And Joe has a very defensive core with also has a lot of offensive pressure with his Groudon and Rayquaza.
Yeah, I think definitely one of the most interesting parts to look out in this matchup will be how exactly Swaggy manages to position his Xerneas here and his using. I'm pretty sure he probably might try to go for the Jumpluff option since there is no opposing weather on Joe's team, and Jumpluff is free to abuse the sun for pretty much the entire battle. However, Swaggy, if he is running Sleep Powder, would have to worry about the potential for a Ferrothorn switch in or a Tapu Koko switch in. But I guess it's not all bad considering Joe has two flying types that are immune to the effects of electric terrain, which does allow them to be put to sleep. And I guess we'll have to see, I guess, how the Megas match up here. The teams are both kind of similar in construction. Like, we still see the Groudon, the Incineroar, and the Koko, but we do see some differing Mega Pokemon and restricted partners. So I guess it'll be an interesting game to see how these pieces work together on each player's team.
Yeah, and the other thing to note is that Joe's team, most of his offensive pressure involves single target attacks, with the exception of his Groudon. And so, of course, Jumpluff with Rage Powder could be essential in setting up his own Xerneas there. Which is an interesting pick for Xerneas Groudon cores. I haven't really seen that before, but it's got a lot of different support options, along with the fighting type coverage. It's going to put a lot of pressure on that Ferrothorn if Ferrothorn is Joe's Xerneas counter.
Yeah, and I guess Joe also does have that Crobat, which is another means of slowing down Xerneas. However, Crobat, it's just a means of slowing down Xerneas. Isn't exactly a hard counter like Ferrothorn is. So if Swaggy is able to position around this Crobat and, position himself in a way that he's able to deal with Ferrothorn in the end game, I think this could be a very easy cleanup for his Xerneas in the back. But he does have to be kind of careful with it because, like I said, he does have two means of disrupting it. So we're just going to go right into the game. Oh my gosh, I need to mute sound effects. All right, here we go. So going into turn one, we're going to see the Incineroar Koko coming out from Swaggy McBuckets and Tapu Koko and Groudon coming out for JoeUX9.
And immediately we see that Swaggy has fake out pressure to pressure both Tapu Koko and Groudon. Tapu Koko is, of course, very likely to have the exact same speed stat, and so we might see speed ties come into play, especially if they're both a Fairy variant where they both can KO each other. Groudon puts a lot of pressure on both of Swaggy's Pokemon, and so he might have to try to position around that.
Yep, and we're going to see the fake out going into the Groudon just to likely stop an incoming ground type attack into either of Swaggy's ground weak Pokemon, as Tapu Koko is just going to go for a safe Volt Switch, as Swaggy actually goes for the Volt Switch into the Tapu Koko's Volt Switch, and since he lost the speed tie, he was able to get the KO on the incoming Crobat. So I guess that's kind of an instance of where losing a speed tie actually isn't so bad sometimes.
And then Swaggy goes right back into his Lopunny for more fake out pressure, and Joe goes into his Tapu Koko, who does have Twinkle Tackle and manages to OHKO the Lopunny while Swaggy's Incineroar goes for a U-turn, switches out, and now gives him the potential to go right back into that fake out pressure, which is exactly what he does, bringing in his Xerneas and potentially getting a Geomancy up.
Yeah, that critical hit was kind of unfortunate. I'm not sure about my low punny calcs, but I'm pretty sure Swaggy was banking on not being KO'd by Twinkle Tackle since he did not Mega Evolve with his Lopunny, so he did not gain the fighting typing and therefore a weakness. But yeah, we're just going to see Swaggy get the Geomancy up and go for the Dazzling Gleam. Earth Power, not going to do too much damage, but it does get the special defense drop, which is a bit annoying for Swaggy, but he's going to be able to take up 2 knockouts with this turn with a Malicious Moonsault into the Groudon, and with Rayquaza being JoeUX9's last Pokemon, it does seem not super in his favor since, you know, Swaggy does still have his Z move, presumably Z move Coco in the back, and even though Xerneas is in likely extreme speed range from this Rayquaza, it looks like Swaggy may be able to clean up with his Coco, but
so earlier with Malicious Moon Assault, and he protects the Xerneas, anticipating the extreme speed, but instead, Joe makes a read, goes for Earth Power into the Incineroar, and knocks it out. Now he gets the extreme speed off onto Xerneas, so it is Tapu Koko versus the Rayquaza, but of course, a single target Dazzling Gleam is enough to take it down, and Swaggy will take game 1.
Yeah, that was a really good play there from Joe, but in the end, it didn't really seem to matter since that Coco was in the back. But you know, reads are reads, very impressive. But going into game 2 here, how do you think these players will adjust for this matchup?
I think we saw that Joe really doesn't have that many. Sorry, Swaggy doesn't really have that many switch-ins to Groudon, and so his way of getting around Groudon is by keeping fake out pressure on the field at all times. And that worked out really well game 1. I wonder if Joe is going to be able to maneuver his Pokemon in order to avoid fake out pressure all the time. That might mean just not taking a KO on Lopunny when he has the chance to. But instead, he leads Crobat, Rayquaza, and Swaggy leads Lopunny, Tapu Koko. Both players changing it up, and they are going right into it.
Yeah,
Joe switches out, brings it on, and Swaggy switches out into his Incineroar, while Joe protects the Rayquaza. Tapu Koko goes to a Volt Switch into the Groudon slot, of course not affecting it.
yeah, that was a good switch out there from Joe, preserving that Crobat, as we did see it just go immediately down in game 1 after switching into a Tapu Koko Volt Switch. However, with the strong winds, Crobat is able to live that Volt Switch, so that could have been another option if Joe just wanted to go for Tailwind immediately. But he's going to make the safe switch out into Groudon, and as we see on this turn, Swaggy is going to go for the free Volt Switch into Joe's Rayquaza. However, Lopunny is going to switch into another powerful attack, but tanks it this time, but is not going to be able to survive the combination of Dragon Ascent plus Eruption. And we're going to see Incineroar just go straight for the Z move into that Rayquaza, and with the defense drops from Dragon Ascent, we'll be able to take it out. And Joe is going to bring out his Coco, while Swaggy brings out his own Coco.
Yeah, and we did not see the item on Swaggy's Coco earlier in this game, although we saw the Z move go off on Incineroar, so it might just not be a Z move. If it is something like an Assault Vest, it could take an attack from this Groudon. Or once again, we see the Groudon threatens everything on Swaggy's side of the field.
Yes, so Swaggy definitely lacking in Groudon switch-ins, but he's going to have to be forced to switch in his Xerneas, as this Twinkle Tackle, now boosted by Fairyar, is not going to be quite enough for Incineroar, but again, with the help of Groudon's Eruption, should be an easy knockout. Swaggy's definitely in a tough position now.
Yeah, and so this is another case where potentially winning the speed tie. Actually, I don't think that matters. But yeah, so now I don't see how we can power through this Groudon. See the Dazzling Gleam. We see a Thunderbolt knock out the the Tapu Koko, but off before the Groudon, which is useful information. But the Eruption does just take it out,
Yeah.
and Joe will take game 2.
Yep, and even though Xerneas was able to get the faster Geomancy, which is nice information for Joe, knowing that the Xerneas is going to be faster than that Groudon, likely indicating that the Xerneas is quite speedy, since we know that Joe's Groudon is pretty fast on its own. But yep, in the end game, Swaggy just not enough pressure to, or not enough switch-ins rather to this Groudon, so his entire team was just able to take way too much damage. But going into game 3, I guess Swaggy will need to, you know, better position himself around this Groudon and make it so that it just can't click buttons in the end game. But we're going to see turn 1, Joe going with the same lead of Rayquaza Crobat, and Swaggy just going with the standard Incineroar Coco lead that worked out pretty well for him in game 1. And we'll see what Joe decides to do to switch up his game plan here. As we're going to see Swaggy switch out into the Xerneas, and he's going to switch out or go for the Volt Switch into the Crobat, which does not KO thanks to the Delta Stream. He's going to bring back in the Incineroar, which is a good play because now Rayquaza is threatening a lot less physical damage, which Xerneas does not like to deal with. And he now is exerting Fake Out pressure, but that Crobat is still on the field.
Right, and so while Swaggy threatens a fake out Geomancy, which I think was his game plan, the Crobat getting up Tailwind means that now if it does have Haze, it can use Haze the next turn, outspeeding the Xerneas because of Tailwind. Um, yeah, the Rayquaza's damage is mitigated, but Earth Power, of course, hits on the special side, and so it still threatens the Incineroar.
Yeah, that Earth Power definitely did a big chunk to the Incineroar, especially with that Life Orb. I'm curious as to what Swaggy's game plan is going to be when he's facing down that Crobat. But he is going to go for the Fake Out into the Rayquaza. Of course, cannot Fake Out. Well, he can Fake Out Crobat for some chip, but it's not going to flinch, of course, because of Inner Focus. Dazzling Gleam going to score the critical hit, correctly predicting the taunt. However, not going to be enough to take out Crobat, as Swaggy is going to switch on to his secondary Fake Out user, the Lopunny, as Joe is going to go for the double up into Xerneas. Not going to be enough, as this Dazzling Gleam is able to pick up 2 knockouts, as now Swaggy is threatening another Fake Out here, but Joe still has that problematic Groudon in the back.
Right, and I'm still not sure how Swaggy's team is equipped to deal with this Groudon, especially since he didn't bring his own Groudon. I don't see anything that can hit it for super effective damage. And the only thing that can seemingly hit it for neutral damage is the Incineroar and Lopunny, both of which are very threatened by it. And Lopunny now has to choose which Pokemon to click Fake Out into. Is it the Tapu Koko, which still has its Twinkle Tackle, or is it the Groudon, which of course has a full powered eruption coming out potentially?
Yeah, and Joe still has that last turn of Tailwind, and the thing is that Swaggy cannot protect his Xerneas since it got taunted by the Crobat. So regardless of which one that Swaggy decides to Fake Out, both Pokemon, either Pokemon here can score a knockout because Coco's still threatening the Fairy Z, which is now boosted by Fairy Aura. And I mean, Lopunny could survive this, but also it's not going to be surviving it with very much. And you know, if Joe just decides to click Dazzling Gleam, that's a KO on Xerneas, and then just a huge amount of chip on Lopunny. As we're going to see,
And we did see some bulk
yeah.
from Lopunny earlier, and the Lopunny takes very little damage from that Dazzling Gleam, less than I expected it to. It did live a Dragon Descent earlier, so it might actually have some bulk investment.
Yeah, and Swaggy makes a play here, switches out into his Incineroar just to prevent the Xerneas from getting knocked out, potentially seeing some use for Xerneas in the late game, or just preserving it. So now Swaggy is threatening another Fake Out here, but the question is how useful that Fake Out is going to be, considering, you know, he's facing down a lot of damage here, as Incineroar is going to go down to a Tapu Koko Dazzling Gleam, and Groudon, of course, is going to flinch after getting faked out by Incineroar, but that's still a huge amount of damage onto Swaggy's Lopunny, and Joe has still decided not to click the Z move yet.
Also, Swaggy has not decided to Mega Evolve his Lopunny, and I believe any of the games, which makes me wonder, is it something like an Assault Vest Lopunny?
That could be a possibility.
And so we just see the Tapu Koko come back in. Lopunny's frustration, despite the crit, only did about 70% to the Tapu Koko. But both Pokemon on Swaggy's side do outspeed. Well, potentially not because of the Tapu Koko, but and because it potentially isn't a Mega Lopunny. But both Pokemon do outspeed the Groudon, and we do see the Mega Evolution protect on the Tapu Koko, but we do see the return, which is not enough to take down that Groudon. The Groudon goes for an Eruption,
Ooh.
which does take down the Lopunny despite its low health, but does very little to the Tapu Koko.
Yeah, we're in a very interesting spot here because a speed tie might determine this game because we're down 2-2. A Dazzling Gleam will be able to pick up the opposing Koko for Swaggy, and Swaggy actually gets the speed tie, which critical hits the Groudon, allowing it to get knocked out, but winning the speed tie ultimately would have sealed the game for Swaggy anyway because that would have been in range of Xerneas' attack, and Swaggy is just going to barely clinch out the set in this third game.
So congratulations to Swaggy McBuckets, who is the first player to qualify for the top 4 of the Mount Silver Invitational.
Wow, that was a lot tighter of an endgame than I was expecting because I thought, you know, Swaggy kind of had his back against the wall there with his Xerneas at low health, not being able to Geomancy, his Lopunny just not doing a lot besides faking out and getting chip with frustration, but he's able to position his Xerneas in the back. Well, I mean, it still did come down to a speed tie, but you know, he did position himself in a way that he could still win the game despite being down a ton in terms of, you know, HP. But Yeah, that's just the game we play sometimes. It just comes down to those unfortunate rolls.
And with that, we'll be right back with the next set of our top 8.